The 1980s gave us shoulder pads, synthesizers, and the bizarre belief that computers would make life easier. Meanwhile, a handful of paranoid filmmakers were busy creating instruction manuals for our tech-fueled dystopia. These 8 prophetic thrillers predicted surveillance capitalism, corporate overlords, and algorithmic nightmares with terrifying accuracy.
We can now make commercials entirely by computer, with no live actors at all.
Looker should have been our flashing red warning sign about artificial intelligence replacing human performers. But instead, Michael Crichton's 1981 thriller got dismissed as another sci-fi curiosity while we sleepwalked straight into the digital dystopia it predicted. Dr. Larry Roberts, played by Albert Finney, investigates the mysterious deaths of his former patients, all beautiful models who underwent precise cosmetic surgery, only to discover that Digital Matrix Corporation, led by James Coburn's sinister John Reston, is using advanced computer scanning technology to create perfect digital replicas of real people for advertising purposes, essentially eliminating the need for actual human performers, in a plot that feels like it was ripped from today's headlines about deepfakes and AI-generated influencers. What makes this production absolutely bonkers is that Crichton was literally pioneering the exact technology he was warning us about, working with cutting-edge computer graphics companies to create the first commercial film featuring computer-generated 3-dimensional modeling of an entire human body, which required a $12 million budget that studio executives thought was insane for what looked like primitive CGI by today's standards. Behind the scenes, Albert Finney was reportedly so frustrated with Crichton's demanding directorial style and the film's uneven tone that he threatened to abandon the project mid-production, while James Coburn later complained that his role got butchered in the final edit, weakening the film's corporate conspiracy narrative. The production faced additional chaos when they filmed car chase sequences without proper permits, creating legal headaches that mirrored the film's themes about corporate overreach. Talk about life imitating art. Here was a movie about artificial humans being created in a chaotic production that was literally inventing the technology to create artificial humans, and we all just shrugged and waited for Netflix to start replacing actors with algorithms.
Just try and relax, Mrs. Lowry. I'll make you 20 years younger.
Brazil proves that Terry Gilliam's biggest nightmare wasn't the dystopian bureaucracy he created on screen, it was dealing with the actual dystopian bureaucracy at Warner Bros. That tried to destroy his film. Sam Lowry works as a low-ranking government drone trapped in a monotonous, surveillance-heavy future where endless paperwork and malfunctioning technology rule everything, living out heroic fantasies where he rescues a mysterious woman until a clerical error gets an innocent man tortured to death, and Sam becomes obsessed with Jill Layton, a truck driver who resembles his dream girl, leading him down a rabbit hole of corruption that ends with him getting lobotomized by the very system he tried to expose. What's absolutely wild about this production is that Gilliam was simultaneously fighting his own Kafkaesque battle against studio executives who wanted to gut his dark masterpiece and turn it into a crowd-pleasing romance, leading to legendary behind-the-scenes warfare where Gilliam literally took out full-page ads in trade publications demanding the release of his director's cut, while the studio tried to bury the film entirely. The elaborate mechanical sets kept malfunctioning during production, with those iconic, oversized ducts and bizarre contraptions breaking down constantly and causing expensive delays that made executives even more hostile to Gilliam's perfectionist vision. The studio was so terrified of the film's bleak anti-authoritarian message that they created their own sanitized version with a happy ending, essentially proving the movie's point about faceless institutions crushing individual creativity and vision. Here was a film about bureaucratic nightmares being destroyed by actual bureaucratic nightmares. And somehow Gilliam's prescient warnings about surveillance states and dehumanizing technology feel even more relevant today when our smartphones track our every move and algorithms decide what we see.
The Soviet Union had launched a surprise missile attack. A Pentagon spokesman places blame for the error on a computer malfunction.
WarGames turned Matthew Broderick into the world's most dangerous teenager by accidentally starting World War III. And honestly, the fact that this movie didn't inspire every kid in America to start hacking government computers is more surprising than the actual plot. David Lightman, played by Broderick, is a brilliant high school hacker who breaks into what he thinks is a gaming company's computer to play unreleased games, but actually accesses WOPR, the US military's nuclear war simulation system, and starts what he believes is a harmless strategy game called Global Thermonuclear War, which triggers real-world military responses as the computer begins preparing for an actual nuclear strike, while David races to convince government officials that the threat isn't real. What makes this production fascinating is how the military actually cooperated with the filmmakers, providing access to real NORAD facilities and computer equipment, essentially helping Hollywood create a step-by-step guide for teenage hackers to infiltrate government systems during the height of Cold War paranoia. The technical accuracy demanded by producers created intense pressure on the cast to quickly learn computing jargon and realistic hacking procedures. with Broderick and Ali Sheedy getting crash courses in 1980s computer technology that most adults didn't even understand yet. Behind the scenes, there was genuine concern from cybersecurity experts and government officials about whether the film would inspire copycat hacking attempts, leading to careful editing of certain scenes for television broadcasts to avoid showing too much detail about actual computer intrusion techniques. The film's portrayal of artificial intelligence and automated warfare systems proved eerily prescient, basically predicting our current anxieties about AI decision-making in military contexts and the potential for technological glitches to trigger global catastrophes.
Jane?
Yes?
Well, darling, if it gets any better than that, I'm going to have to bring you up here to New York.
Broadcast news predicted a future where television journalism would value polished appearances over reporting expertise. In retrospect, James L. Brooks may have underestimated just how quickly that future would arrive. Jane Craig, played by Holly Hunter, is an intense news producer obsessed with journalistic integrity who finds herself torn between Aaron Altman, a brilliant but awkward reporter who's hopelessly in love with her, and Tom Gronick, played by William Hurt, as a gorgeous but intellectually shallow anchor who gets promoted based purely on his telegenic charm, culminating in a major ethical crisis when Tom fakes tears during a sensitive date rape segment that exposes how style has completely overtaken substance in television news. What's fascinating about this production is that Brooks was essentially making a documentary about the exact problems plaguing his own industry, with real network executives reportedly getting nervous about the film's brutal accuracy and depicting how ratings-obsessed news divisions were sacrificing credibility for entertainment value. Behind the scenes, the cast brought their own professional tensions to the roles, with Albert Brooks pushing for deeper character exploration while William Hurt tried to make his shallow anchor more sympathetic, creating the kind of creative friction that actually enhanced their on-screen chemistry. Brooks was basically predicting the rise of cable news punditry, social media journalism, and the whole concept of infotainment that would completely transform how Americans consume news, making this romantic triangle feel less like a workplace comedy and more like a prophecy about the death of serious broadcast journalism.
What would you little maniacs like to do first?
Weird Science could have served as a cautionary tale about using technology to construct idealized versions of human connection, but instead, John Hughes ended up predicting a digital culture increasingly comfortable with manufacturing intimacy on its own terms. Gary and Wyatt, played by Anthony Michael Hall and Elam Mitchell Smith, are two socially awkward high schoolers who use their computer to literally create Lisa, a gorgeous and super intelligent woman played by Kelly LeBrock, who comes to life with magical powers and teaches them confidence while protecting them from bullies and guiding them through chaotic adventures that blend sci-fi fantasy with typical 1980s teen comedy. What makes this production absolutely wild is that Hughes was essentially shooting a completely improvised fever dream, with the cast ad-libbing scenes while special effects malfunctioned constantly, creating the kind of on-set chaos that somehow perfectly matched the movie's anarchic energy about technology running amok. The film faced serious censorship issues because conservative groups were horrified by the idea of teenagers using computers to create sexual fantasies, leading to heavy editing for television broadcasts and international releases that completely neutered Hughes' already bizarre vision. Behind the scenes, the early computer-generated imagery kept breaking down during filming, forcing multiple retakes and creating a hectic shooting schedule where nobody knew if the technology would actually work from day to day, which feels eerily prophetic given our current relationship with glitchy AI and unreliable digital interfaces. Hughes stumbled into predicting virtual reality, dating apps, and algorithmic matchmaking, essentially blueprinting how technology would reshape romantic connection. What seemed like absurd comedy then now reads like a field guide for navigating love through screens, where digital interfaces promise to solve the messy complications of human attraction with the efficiency of code.
Your body has already done a lot of changing, but that's only the beginning.
Videodrome predicted that watching too much violent television would literally transform your body into a weapon, and honestly, given how social media algorithms are rewiring our brains today, David Cronenberg might have been more accurate than anyone realized. Max Wren, played by James Woods, runs a sleazy UHF station in Toronto that specializes in sex and violence programming until he discovers a pirate broadcast called Videodrome that shows what appears to be real torture and murder, leading him down a rabbit hole of media manipulation and mind control that causes his body to undergo grotesque physical transformations as reality and hallucination become indistinguishable. What makes this production absolutely insane is that special effects legend Rick Baker had his preferred 6-month timeline slashed to just 2 months, forcing his team to improvise with materials like dental dam to create that iconic breathing television screen effect, where they projected footage onto stretchable rubber backed by air bladders, controlled like an organ keyboard. Behind the scenes, Cronenberg kept rewriting scenes throughout filming, pushing James Woods to endure increasingly uncomfortable prosthetics, while the crew scrambled to adapt the director's evolving vision of body horror meets media theory. The film faced massive censorship controversies because ratings boards were terrified by its graphic depictions of violence and sexual mutilation, leading to heavy cuts in markets like the UK, where some video rental shops refused to carry it during the video nasty's moral panic. Cronenberg was essentially predicting our current relationship with addictive media consumption, algorithmic manipulation, and the way screens literally reshape our neural pathways, making Max Ren's physical transformation feel less like science fiction and more like a metaphor for what infinite scrolling is doing to our actual brains.
Cops don't like me, so I don't like cops.
RoboCop proved that the most terrifying thing about a dystopian future wasn't the killer cyborgs, it was the corporate executives who built them to maximize profit margins while society collapsed around them. Alex Murphy, played by Peter Weller, is a dedicated Detroit cop who gets brutally murdered by criminals and resurrected by Omni Consumer Products as a cybernetic law enforcement officer programmed to serve the public, but when fragments of Murphy's memories start returning, he uncovers massive corruption within both the police force and the corporation that created him while battling violent gangs in a decaying urban wasteland. What's wild about this production is that Weller's RoboCop costume was so prohibitively heavy and restrictive that he regularly overheated during long shooting days. But he fought hard against directors and producers who wanted RoboCop portrayed as a soulless machine, insisting that traces of Murphy's humanity should show through, and prompting multiple script rewrites to add emotional depth to the character. The film's practical effects pushed boundaries with real car crashes and elaborate stunts that required meticulous coordination without modern CGI assistance, creating a grueling shooting environment that matched the movie's gritty realism. Upon release, RoboCop sparked massive moral panic with critics and politicians condemning its graphic violence and vigilante themes, while parents' groups pressured censors to impose stricter ratings because they feared it glorified authoritarianism and desensitized audiences to police brutality. The film's satirical critique of corporate greed, privatized law enforcement, and media sensationalism feels eerily prescient today, when police departments are increasingly militarized and tech companies wield unprecedented power over public safety, making RoboCop less like science fiction and more like a documentary about our current slide toward corporate-controlled surveillance states.
All right, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Just relax and answer them as simply as you can.
Blade Runner predicted that artificial intelligence would become so sophisticated that we'd struggle to tell humans from machines, and honestly, the fact that we're now debating whether chatbots have feelings proves Ridley Scott was basically making a documentary about 2024. Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, is a reluctant Blade Runner tasked with hunting down 4 escaped Nexus 6 replicants who've returned to Earth seeking their creator, Eldon Tyrell, hoping to extend their programmed 4-year lifespans, while Deckard grapples with questions of identity and humanity after meeting Rachel, a replicant implanted with false memories, who doesn't know she's artificial. What makes this production legendary is the absolute chaos behind the cameras, with Scott's ambitious vision requiring elaborate miniatures and dangerous practical effects that push the crew to their limits, while Harrison Ford openly despised the project, describing the atmosphere as tense and challenging because he felt Deckard was underwritten and poorly motivated. The studio was so terrified of the film's dark philosophical themes that they forced Scott to add a cheery voiceover narration and hopeful ending that both Ford and Scott hated, leading to years of bitter battles over creative control and multiple director's cuts that tried to restore the original bleak vision. Behind the scenes, visual effects supervisor Douglas Trumbull's perfectionist approach to creating the neon-drenched cityscape caused massive delays and budget overruns, while Ford sustained injuries during action sequences but kept filming through the pain. Scott was essentially predicting our current anxiety about AI consciousness, deepfakes, and the blurred lines between authentic and artificial intelligence, making Deckard's existential crisis about whether replicants deserve rights feel less like science fiction and more like preparation for the ethical debates we're having about artificial consciousness and autonomous systems today.